Often you normally see the man coming in and swooping in and saving the woman, but like in real life, when I look at the relationships that I've witnessed through friends, family, loved ones, it's not the men who are saving the women, it's the women who are coming in and nurturing 100%. And saving and like, and they are the anchor, they are the knight in shining armor. Men see this and they're like, yes, I felt that. I've felt that love, whether it be maternal love, romantic love, platonic love, I have felt that. And I think that like, that's why this movie resonates with people of all ages and genders.
Hi besties, it's Katie from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. Blake Lively's attorney, Meryl Gavrnsky, has quit the law firm that she's been working at since at least 2023 and has joined a new firm. And she has pulled out of a case that she was co-leading with Michael Gottlieb in a case between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, where Drake is suing Kendrick for defamation along with UMG. And as of today, Gavrnsky is going to continue with Blake's case for now. But the shakeup at the law firm is just one of 7 partners, high-profile ones at that have left Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher since they agreed to a settlement with Trump after Trump issued an executive order against various law firms who had attorneys who have investigated Donald Trump or who are involved in challenges to his policies, which he viewed as enemies to his administration. He created all of these executive orders trying to restrict their business with the federal government. And some of these firms ended up settling with him and giving X amount of dollars to him. And Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, who's one of their partners is Doug Emhoff, which is Kamala Harris's husband. They agreed to $100 million in free legal services to agreed upon projects with Trump, and that they would not engage in illegal diversity-related employment practices. And apparently, when that happened, there was an internal memo that was said. This is all from Reuters. It says, "We know this news is not welcome to some of you, and you would have urged a different course of action. Needless to say, this was an incredibly difficult decision for firm leadership." And they agreed to the payout basically because they said they wouldn't have been able to stay in business. Now, interestingly, since this settlement, there has been multiple firms that have sued the administration for these executive orders, and at least 4 judges have deemed the executive orders unconstitutional. So Meryl happened to be one of the dissenters that decided to leave over this decision. And then she joined a group of attorneys that left another major law firm that is Paul Weiss and Skadden and Arps. That firm actually was instrumental in the prosecution of Trump in Manhattan related to those business fraud charges. So a bunch of partners from Paul Weiss, at least 4, branched off in May, and they went to start their own firm. And Meryl has gone and left with them. And so 7 total people that are at least high-profile partners at Gottlieb's firm, he's on the executive board for Wilkie, Farr, and Gallagher, they have left because they don't agree with this $100 million that they paid Trump. So I'm not trying to be political here. I'm just sharing what actually happened, what's been going on behind the scenes. And ultimately, she is staying on the case for now, but I don't know. She could pull she could be pulled at any time because now she has attorneys from at least 3 different firms representing her at this point. And the boutique lawsuit that Gavrnsky is going to was formed in May. So it's a brand new firm and she'll be a partner there. I know there had been rumblings on the internet that she had quit or she would quit the case and it was like she was quitting this case. But it sounds like the issues that were happening were not related to the Blake case, but rather to what her disagreements with what the firm was doing. Of course, she didn't respond to a comment about leaving the firm, but Gottlieb did tell Reuters today that, he hopes that he can still collaborate with her in the future. She has been a pretty instrumental partner to Gottlieb for years. She's led huge defamation cases with him. So the fact that she's leaving is a pretty significant thing to him. And given that her background is in she was a journalist before she became a lawyer. Um, now that she's left and she's with a new firm, I'll wonder how involved she's going to be in all of this. If her departure from the firm is any indication to what they filed in court yesterday to try to prove jurisdiction, it makes me wonder how much Gottlieb has been relying on her. It's just hear me out here, because Gottlieb filed this 2-page letter to try to prove that Jed Wallace has ties to New York, and their arguments are nonsensical. I asked attorneys about it, and they all said it's nonsense, and it likely won't pass the muster test. But because the judge asked them to do 2-page letter where they address what actions that occurred within this conspiracy could actually be tied to New York and Jed's connection to New York. Because Jed has said in his declaration, Wallace, that he believed he was working with Wayfair, a California company, and working with Tag, a California company, and that most of his communications were with Melissa Nathan, who was a California resident, and that he was never in New York, and she can't even name a single action that he did that targeted New York. And so her firm is trying to use a harebrained, long stretching the arm. This is a stretch to argue because they had to come up with something. But they said the amended complaint identifies numerous specific co-conspirators who committed overt acts in the furtherance of the defendant's conspiracy while physically located in New York. As just a few examples, the amended complaint alleges that the defendants Baldoni, Heath, and Wayfair heard from Miss Lively in person in New York about the very complaints that prompted their retaliation campaign. Jed was not on the team when that happened, by the way. He was not there, so that's not going to work. Then they say that Melissa Nathan lived and conducted business in New York during a portion of the relevant period. That still doesn't prove that Jed was doing anything. And then Steve Sarowitz announced the conspiracy plan to ruin the lives of Miss Lively and her family at the film's New York premiere. Jed was not hired until August 8th or 9th. The film premiere in New York was August 6th. So everything that she is literally using to prove that he's connected is before he was even hired. The amended complaint also alleges that Nathan furthered the conspiracy by communicating with and causing content to be provided to journalists, content creators, and media entities in New York, including at least one journalist in New York and another at the New York Times, one of whom was Nathan's sister. Given that Nathan lived in New York during a portion of the relevant period, it's reasonable to infer that Nathan conducted much of that activity, each instance of which would constitute an overt act while physically present in New York. This isn't going to work. Because even if she says what this is, she hasn't identified what actually was done that was harmful to her. And it doesn't tie Jed to any of it, just that Nathan might have been in New York. Not him, but Nathan. He's not Nathan. Those New York contacts are easily attributed to the Wallace defendants for purpose of a motion to dismiss stage personal jurisdiction analysis. No, it's not. The amended complaint alleges that Nathan and Tag had a relationship with Mr. Wallace that preceded this litigation, and that Miss Nathan worked with Mr. Wallace on a previous matter, and Tag retained him to work with them on behalf of the defendants, Wayfair and Mr. Baldoni. This is hysterical. If this is the best that Michael Gottlieb can do, it's really bad. So basically what they're trying to argue is that Jed Wallace had partnered with Melissa in the past on something completely unrelated with Melissa, and that Melissa might have a house that she stays in New York. And so therefore, even before anything happened with Blake, Wallace and Nathan were tied to New York together. That doesn't even make sense. You're trying to like prosecute him for something he did before he even knew who you were. She's basically trying to say because he knew Nathan, this is the whole roundabout, because he knew Nathan, and because Nathan is in New York sometimes, and because Steve Sarowitz said something at the premiere, and because Baldoni learned about the allegations in New York, that's how Jed is tied to New York. It is reasonable to infer that Wallace knew that Nathan resided in New York. His declaration flat out says that he conducted business with California companies and Melissa Nathan, who he believed to be a California resident. At all times, he said in his declaration, he believed that he was dealing with a California-based company. This is sufficient to attribute to Nathan and Tagg's New York-based acts to the Wallace defendants under the New York and federal law broad approach to agency. It's a large statute contacts to co-conspirators when the defendant had an awareness of the effects in New York activity. The activity of the co-conspirators in New York was to benefit the out-of-state conspirators, and the co-conspirators acting in New York acted at the direction or under the control or at the request of or on behalf of the out-of-state defendant. He wasn't the one calling the shots. This is really, it's not going to work. I don't think, because he can answer it pretty easily here. She also claims that defendants knew that their co-conspirators included New York-based individuals and entities who were taking steps in New York to retaliate against Miss Lively and portray her in a false light, and that the Wallace defendants were paid for it. The third requirement is that they are basing it on co-conspirators at the direction under the control of the out-of-state defendant may be satisfied by an allegation that the out-of-state defendant was aware of the torts being committed by co-conspirators. So she can't say that Jed was directing any of it. She can only say that he knew it was happening. This is super flimsy. So flimsy. They're also arguing that conspiracy jurisdiction is something that's going to work and it's going to overcome long arm statute, which is of their own individual activities. They say that Wallace nowhere challenged the sufficiency of other co-conspirators' jurisdictional context under any provision of the New York long arm statute. In any event, the co-conspirators had extensive suit-related contacts with New York that must be attributed to the Wallace defendants. And that by joining the conspiracy, he knew that they were furthering their acts to be taken place in New York. But then, this is the hilarious part. They're paranoid that this isn't going to work because any defects as to the allegations of personal jurisdiction with respect to the Wallace parties would be curable by amendment based upon materials obtained in discovery, including from Mr. Wallace. Those additional allegations could relate to the nature and timing of his retention information shared with Wallace and the nature and timing of the co-conspirators' activities in New York. So what they're telling the judge is they're paranoid this is going to get dismissed, and they're willing to amend their lawsuit because of it. Y'all, it's about to get real. So Blake's case and her claims are kind of all over the place. There's so many of them. And just to give you an understanding, right now, she has Wallace tied to aiding and abetting harassment and retaliation. And Wallace is central to this claim, which means that he was a part of discriminatory conduct directed at Lively, and they coordinated an astroturfing campaign to discredit and bury her. Okay, so if he's removed, this claim becomes harder to prove because he's not a part of the case anymore. And then the discovery gets limited, right? And if she wants to try the case for that, she has to go to Texas. And in Texas, you know, he's got a lawsuit against her. And then the other one that he could be out of would be false light invasion of privacy. And this is related to what she claims are Street and Wallace publicly disclosing, along with the other defendants, information or material regarding her marketing decisions, her moral character, her private life and family, which showed her in a false light. Which, by the way, the whole crux of this entire lawsuit is that she's mad that people criticize the way that she marketed the film. She doesn't like that she got that backlash. And she also doesn't like that people on the internet shared videos of her own words, making comments to people that people thought were rude, or they reposted her interview clips where she was rude to journalists or snarky to fans or flippant or didn't take the situation seriously. None of that is, detailing anything about her private life or her moral character. I didn't see a single article about anything to do with her morals or her family. And that she claims, and this is a flimsy one to begin with, right? Because you have to believe then that the internet didn't just do the internet thing and do what the internet does, and they find a million clips that prove that this person's a horrible person. That's what happens when someone gets canceled. So if he's gone from that, she says that this claim is the one that constituted a serious invasion of her right to privacy, and it was an egregious breach of social norms. And they alleged conduct above with oppression, fraud, and malice. So that claim is the malice side of it. So if he's gone from that, this is where all of those videos that she claims were seeded by them, the case will fall apart. And then if he's removed from the civil conspiracy, you're removing the person that you claim is the one that seeded and planted all of these videos and these negative comments that you claimed were done by a digital army that you believe that Wallace put out on the internet against you. And so he's central to the civil conspiracy because she believes all of the social media outrage was not organic, and that it was planted and it was bots, or it was, people working in Hawaii, or it was, Wayfair paying creators to talk about her. So if the civil conspiracy relies heavily on Wallace, then that conspiracy alone with the remaining defendants becomes harder to prove. And the risk here then is that if Wallace is dismissed, she will have to reconsider what she's going to do. And so this gets me back to, why is she now focusing on content creators? My theory here is this. I believe that Blake knows that there was no untraceable smear campaign. I believe she knows that Jed Wallace didn't do anything. I fully believe that the reason that she's now targeting content creators is because it's her new theory. So she's preparing for Jed to get tossed, or her attorneys are. And so now the new theory is, and it must be, that Brian Friedman or his team paid content creators like Candace Owens and Perez Hilton and Andy to make not pro Blake content, that they were fed information to make for their videos, that they were somehow paid to do this on behalf of Wayfair. So she can't claim and prove the untraceable smear campaign. She can't. And even by this letter to the judge, she's saying she doesn't have proof that he did anything in New York. I mean, it all but says that he did nothing in New York, and she can't think of a single thing that he did in New York, only that Melissa might have been in New York when they were talking. And the bigger issue here for me, is that as much as people like Brian Friedman and they love his firm, I think there's been mistakes here when it comes to how they decided not to do a motion to dismiss against her claims. He has done motions to dismiss with other high profile people like Vin Diesel when he was accused by someone that used to work for him of sexual harassment. And he did it under the grounds related to how the CRD complaint was filed. And there was this window of time because it was time barred. The problem with Blake is that her sexual harassment claims are barred by the federal government. You have a year from the time that the incident happens to file a lawsuit, and she didn't. So she can't sue for that. And there's issues with how she filed the CRD complaint and what she included for the CRD complaint, as far as some of the allegations she made about whether or not she even had a right to sue for those specific causes. She, to me, brought a frivolous lawsuit to the court, and what happened was they didn't file a motion to dismiss, and they should have. They should have filed one for the issues related to the federal not getting a letter from the EEOC. They should have related to issues with the CRD complaint. They should have related to the time barred issues with the sexual harassment claims. there's even issues on whether or not retaliation that happens, a year later, even remotely is grounds for being retaliation. There's time limits for retaliation. And part of the reason why everything is not going to go well for her in her case is that she, in her own complaint, says that they addressed the issues when she brought them to them. And then there were no other issues on the set and everything filmed as normal. And it was fine after she signed the 17-point agreement. So she's like suing for something she said they resolved, which doesn't make sense. And then she's trying to claim that after they resolved everything, then they decided to retaliate a year later or 9 months later. That's just not how retaliation works. So what I view this as a window, because say the judge is like, okay, yeah, I'm going to allow you leave to amend. And then Blake has to amend the complaint, which means her entire complaint as is amended for all parties, all of them, not just Wallace, but all of them, which then opens the door that Justin and Wayfair and Sarowitz and Nathan and Abel can all then file motions to dismiss. So what's really happening here is her case is on the verge of falling apart, and they know it. So now they have to go after the content creators because they know, in my opinion, that their case against Jed is very flimsy. They're admitting they have no evidence against him in that letter. They have no ties of Jed to New York. They can't even name a single action he took, a concrete action that is, that would have done any of the things that she claims happened to her, like a false light, aiding, abetting, all of that. None of it at this point proves any of her claims. So Gottlieb is really, grasping at straws. And quite honestly, I would love to see them do a motion or have him grant the motion to dismiss and then give her leave to amend and then give Wayfair the opportunity to then file their own motions to dismiss, because they'll have way more grounds at that point, because then she's really barred from the EEOC at that point. She had 30 days to go to the EEOC and she did not. So they'll know for a fact that she didn't go there. They can have those claims dismissed right off the bat, time barred. They can fight every single one of them and have them all dismissed. Honestly, her case is very flimsy. We'll have to see how this goes. But yeah, I'm getting the sense that if Jed is dismissed, the whole case will fall apart. And then if they amend, it'll just allow everyone else to file motions to dismiss, which would be wonderful. And I know some people are like, Justin needs to be vindicated. No, really, he doesn't. He doesn't need to be vindicated, because a dismissal is a dismissal is a dismissal. And if she didn't state a claim, it should be that she didn't state a claim. As much as we don't like that Justin's case was dismissed, we don't know if they're going to appeal. We hope that they do. Blake's case should have been dismissed. It was a frivolous lawsuit from day one. And he doesn't need to vindicate himself and go to trial to vindicate himself. The court of public opinion has already spoken, and they've said he's not guilty. So what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't subscribed, and click the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye, besties.